We were talking and have spoken a lot about the benefits of peer learning and the formalization of peer learning, something that we've developed this intellectual process over the last 4 years. And we've seen some successes. But one of the things that is good for us and good for our listeners is for them to understand, why would you want to do this? Because ultimately you're up against the formalized training process. And the formalized training people are going to say, the best training is always going to come from it's going to come from the external things. You need to have this and need to adhere to these standards, those standards, depending on where you are in the world. I think in order to understand why our peer learning process and internship process works and why it I think we're going to go through a number of benefits, which you and I will just discuss. So please excuse this awful word, but harnesses the knowledge that exists within the organization. So I know a lot about stuff. You know a lot about stuff. You do your job. I do my job. There are certain things that I've learned from you because you said, well, if you do this, I remember once you show me how to write a text on WhatsApp, and that you could move your finger years ago, and you could move your finger across the thing and then insert a letter, something that I've learned that's made my texting and WhatsApping so much more efficient. And that's just an informal sharing process. But we've always agreed that everybody's an expert at something, but that expertise should not remain within that person or within a division. It should be shared because it will be improved upon. So innovation, what's it called? Emulation results in innovation. Is it like anything else that perhaps I haven't mentioned about that?
Yeah, I just think that companies at risk of losing that expertise or that knowledge when someone leaves. We are unfortunately in a place in society where we don't necessarily pass the knowledge on to someone else anymore because we all sit behind a screen and we don't actually talk to each other. So I think the benefit of this is really to share and to open up avenues and ways of sharing that, and then ensuring that the next guy is also able to continue with that. Yes, you will lose some skills because the older people and the guys who've been here for 30 years have certain expertise and knowledge that will take you 30 years to gain. But in that process, you actually enable the next guy to learn from the expert in that specific setting of space.
There's a continuity aspect to that in terms of the more experienced people passing on the knowledge, which is obviously what every single company wants. Sometimes it comes down to the generations. The boomers are in our experience, one of our clients told us, the boomers hold their knowledge really, really close to their hearts because they know they're coming to the end of their career. They want to feel valued. They're also petrified of being trained, and because they'll be shown up. So specifically in this day with technology and, the awful cliche artificial intelligence, these guys are not interested in this thing. But if you put them in an internship session where they start talking to people, and this young Gen Z guy says, well, if you do this just by going onto your cell phone and ask that question, you may find that there's a different perspective, and the guy will go in a very non-threatening environment. And so the knowledge gets passes on. Everyone benefits from it mutually. But also think about the, let's say, really, really valuable skills like chartered accountants. And a chartered accountant, I don't know any chartered accountants personally, but I'm hazarding a guess here. Forgive me. But yeah, a chartered accountant picks up a lot of skill. They understand the business. They understand the business particularly well. And so not only do they know what their job is, which I think anybody could do, but they know how to do the job in that organization. So someone like Rudolph, who is a chartered accountant, leaves. There is a massive gap because they've got to bring someone in to try and pick up the slack, but also get someone who understands what Rudolph did. Because there would be quirks, he would have understood certain types of he would have developed different relationships with different service providers, banks, whatever the case is, auditors and all that kind of stuff. That's really important. So that if that knowledge is kept within at least part of that knowledge, you can't, the expertise and the experience that you pick up, it's not all transferable, but there are bits that ensure that the continuity remains. So Rudolph leaves, someone else comes in, Janus comes in, takes over, he's going to spend a month or two trying to figure out what's going on where. But if there's someone else in Rudolph's department that says, well, what Rudolph used to do is this is the person he used to talk to, this is how he used to talk to it, who may be, a chartered accountant or an accountant or whatever. But that's also really important. It's very much about continuity. Continuity is so critical, specifically where we are at the moment. In a country like South Africa, where there's a chronic shortage there is a brain drain. I don't know, what it's like now versus what it was like, say, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And we need to retain skills, and we need to make sure that provide the stakeholders and shareholders some form of comfort that should someone as critical as Rudolph leaves, that there is a stopgap, like the CEO leaves, and it'll take the CEO a year to come in, try and figure out how the company works, and then change everything. But if you've got an internship process at the executive level, the so-called C-suite, awful term, but the executive level, so that this information is being shared at the same time the CEO is learning about the company. Because let's face it, it's a lot easier for a CEO to figure out how the company works in a non-threatening environment, because they're going to come in, she's going to come in, and she's going to start calling the shots at the outset, because that's what she's been hired to do. But she comes in, it's very disruptive and just wreaks havoc. Happens all the time. Which something that we haven't spoken about is our auditor scale, where we rate a company on the basis of their ability to transfer and retain knowledge across all verticals and sorry, yeah, verticals and horizontals in the company, so that we can provide some form of a certificate to our clients and say they rate 8 out of 10 on their auditor scale, which means that should there be a calamity, at least the shareholders, the stakeholders, whoever else would know that there's some form of learning and knowledge transfer within the organization, that in the case of a calamity, the business can continue and it's not hobbled. I don't know if I've covered that. You haven't discussed the auditor scale, which is something that we should, maybe not now, but it's something really important.